President writes the Senate seeking approval to borrow more, this time $3 billion for funding of the 2017 budget. But where this leaves the Nigerian debt profile, we'll consider this the reason for borrowing a bit. And President Muhammadu Buhari meets service chiefs and Minister of Defense behind closed doors. He got the briefing on the current security situation in the country. Many thanks for joining in, everyone. This is Politics Today live on Channels Television. I'm Shion Kimbaloye in Lagos. Kenyan opposition leader Raila Odinga has opted out of the court-ordered presidential rerun election in that country. President Uhuru Kenyatta's hacked rival said he would not stand in that election scheduled for October the 26th. He believes the polls would not be free or fair. But President Kenyatta said the election will proceed as planned despite the withdrawal of his only challenger. From one election story to another, not in Nigeria, but polls have closed in Liberia as the nation elects its next president and 73 members of the House of Representatives. This is the first transition election in Liberia in 70 years. Chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, Professor Mahmoud Yakubu, is the president of the ECOWAS Network of Electoral Commission. He is in the West African country as an observer. He will be updating us right here on the program much more later as we're able to connect with him. But let's go to some of the stories that we're following for you right on the program. Right now, President Muhammadu Buhari has met with service chiefs, Minister of Defense, retired Brigadier Mansour Dan Ali, and the National Security Advisor, retired Major General Babangana Munganun. The Director General of the State Security Services, Lawal Dora, and the Acting Director of the Nigeria Intelligence Agency, Ambassador Arabi Yadam, and the representative of the Inspector General of the Police were also in attendance at that meeting. The meeting was held behind closed doors. There was no statement or any comment at the end of the meeting, which lasted for more than 5 hours, as reporters said to us. And now to our major story. President Muhammadu Buhari has written the Senate of Nigeria to seek approval for external loan to the tune of $3 billion. The president also sought the lawmakers' approval to issue a 2.5 billion euro bond in the international market. Senate President Bukola Saraki read a letter to his colleagues at the chamber. In that letter, the president said the bonds would be channeled towards funding the 2017 budget, while the loan would be used in refinancing of maturing domestic debts. That said, how much has the country borrowed, or how much has his administration borrowed, and what are the reasons for the borrowing? Well, let me quickly show you some of these breakdown of the Nigerian budget, and perhaps to get a sense of what all of this is all about and the reasons perhaps for the nation's borrowing that much. Well, if you look at the oil benchmark, this is a breakdown of some of the details of the 2017 budget as passed. Oil production, 2.2 million. Exchange rate, that's what it leaves us. Inflation rate and the GDP growth rate. If you flip the page, this is a breakdown as put together by budget. Federal government, this is a proposed budget breakdown. And if you look at it, the deficit in the budget is about 32%. That's about 2.36 trillion. That means the government will be looking forward to financing that deficit, which the capital expenditure in this budget is 2.24 trillion. And if you look at the expected revenue at 4.96 trillion, and the entire budget proposal is 7.2 trillion naira. If you go on to some other information that we have for you in the breakdown of the 2017 budget, the federal government proposed the budget, how the deficit of 2.36 trillion will be financed. If you look at it on the left-hand side, is the domestic borrowing, which is about 1.252 trillion, and the external borrowing 1.06 trillion. Let's get to the conversation of the day on the program right here. Senator Enang is with us. He's the Senior Special Assistant to President Muhammadu Buhari on National Assembly matters. When you talk about budget, yeah, this is one man, he knows the numbers. He's a co-founder of Budget. He joins us in Lagos. Many thanks, gentlemen, for joining us on the program. If I may quickly come to you, Senator Enang. From what we are seeing right now, there was the presentation made by the Minister of Budget and National Planning, Udo Udoma, last week, and there was also the presentation by the Minister of Finance where they were asking the National Assembly to give the executive support in terms of how much money when they're talking about implementation of the budget. But today they've gone, the government is asking for more money. What exactly, why do we need to borrow so much more?
What we need to borrow more, thank you very much, Channels and Akimbaloye, because in your analysis at the opening of this program, you did say that the budget 2017 had provided for a deficit of over 2 trillion naira. And it was also provided in the budget that the deficit will be financed by external and domestic borrowing. And although that budget has provided for that, the Debt Management Act provides that before you can go to borrow, you must seek the approval of the National Assembly for the specific, a resolution for the specific borrowing, for the specific project, and a specific tenure, and the terms and conditions. Therefore, although the budget is an act, and it had provided for this borrowing, it had provided that there will be borrowing, for you to actually go to borrow, you must go back to the National Assembly that made that provision in that act to specifically ask for the sum. So this request by His Excellency Mr. President is a request to borrow for capital projects which were stated in that act, namely the Mambila hydropower project, again the second runway of the Mullah Muhammad, the second runway of the airport, then the capital, then the counterpart funding for the railway project. And the railway project, you remember, had been earlier requested in the rolling plan, and the National Assembly, the Senate in particular, had approved it, and we are waiting for the approval of the National Assembly, of the House of Representatives for harmonization. Therefore, what the borrowing is about is to fund what was provided for in the 2017 Appropriation Act. Again, that is for 2.5 billion US dollars. Then there is another request of Mr. President for approval of 3 billion US dollars to fund or refinance existing domestic debt. And in that letter of His Excellency, Mr. President, it is expressly stated that this is not a different borrowing, that this is not going to increase the debt portfolio or the borrowing portfolio of Nigeria, that this debt already exists, but that it is the domestic, it is debt owed by the in the domestic market to local banks, and it is owed at a high interest rate, that we are to borrow from outside the country for the purpose of taking advantage of the low interest rates, paying the local market so that the money can return back to the local market, and so that money that is available in the local market could be available to be loaned or to be taken advantage of by other businesses which will be interested in borrowing. So it is to borrow the $3 billion US dollar to refinance existing domestic debt, but at a cheaper rate, and to make money available. Therefore, it's not going to increase what Nigeria is owing, and it is not borrowing too much. And it is asking for borrowing in accordance with the Act, the 2017 2017 Appropriation Act and is asking for this borrowing in compliance with the Debt Management Office Establishment Act.